Good morning and most welcome to 11:59. We had a bit of localization problem here. We're at the local library and now we are here in Hisingen at my home, the abode of me. And I would take up an article from the Pagman and it's written by Larry R Vandervert. I will take a look at it, read from it, and then finish doing that. I will do a conclusion. I already have it ready. That would be after the read of this one. It's odd. I see where he's situated, and he's actually situated in Spokane, which is the village or town, small town, of Pete Green actually. What are the chances in a very odd province of the States, Washington? I've never been there. It's called Chaos Theory and the Evolution of Consciousness and Mind, a thermodynamic holographic resolution. This is important. It is double meaning resolution, remember that. Resolution to the mind-body problem. Abstract. This address describes neurological positivism, NP, energetic evolution of consciousness, mind, and the brain-mind relationship within a model that integrates ideas and research from chaos theory, Pre-Bram's holonomic brain theory, evolutionary theory, and the laws of thermodynamics. The energetic evolution and encapsulation of space-time consciousness from chaotic holographic environments is described. Consciousness is described as a natural evolutionary space-time template of continuously generated self-referential energy patterns. The energetic evolution of mind is described as a natural self-referential exteriorization of the algorithmic organization of consciousness in the form of culturally shared mental models. It is proposed that the brain-mind-energy relationship has historically undergone and continues to undergo change, and that this change is a natural thermodynamic arrow that constitutes the evolution of culture. That is, the evolution of culture proceed in the direction of progressively more complete and efficient exteriorization of the algorithmic organization of the brain. Thus, for example, the recent evolution of brain-like computing systems and virtual reality systems. Accordingly, an uneven but closing central energy state identity, self-similarity, between brain and mind is described. It is concluded that NP's conception of mind helps us understand the evolutionary unfoldment of culture and provides a sense of direction to its future. Chaos theory in the context of this address. Almost everyone these days has at least heard about chaos theory, although not many lay people really understand what it is all about. In this paper, it will not be possible to provide a comprehensive introduction to chaos theory. I will assume that the reader has enough knowledge, or perhaps enough of an intuitive feel, to know that chaos theory has something to do with a deeper underlying order that seems to reside virtually everywhere in nature. That, along with a few introductory ideas that will be provided, should be enough for the alert layperson to follow the general thesis and arguments in this address. For those who like to pursue a comprehensive introduction to the idea and methods of chaos theory, recommended is Gleek, Abraham Shaw, and I will put to that recommendation list David F. Peat, maybe Bruce Lipton as well.
Could you please write the name of the author of this article on the whiteboard?
His name is Vandervert.
Very difficult. So
Yeah, it's V-A-N-D-E-R-V-E-R-T.
Let's do quickly. Vandervert.
But all the names of the things I read should be, and if they're not in description, you can send in an angry mail. But don't use curse words. But my idea is everything that I read during the lectures will be added in the description list, so you can look further. It is upon more general patterns of the deep underlying dynamic order of complexity in nature that attention will be focused. Of course, the mathematics of chaos theory fit hand in glove with these patterns. But as it will be seen later within the framework of neurological positivism, the patterns have their origins in the algorithmic organization of the brain, and therefore precede in time the mathematical science that describes them. Once more, we have fact before description. First something happens, and then we have a description, not the other way around. It's the same with the Roger Penrose example with Roger Federer. First he collapses the superposition, and then we in the audience, including Roger Penrose, do make a description, or as we usually say, have an experience, but it comes after. Whether we are studying turbulent flows in rivers, dynamic energy hierarchies in ecosystems, or the four nested characteristics of the human stream of consciousness, delineated introspectively by Julian Jaynes. For example, the fundamental underlying organizational patterns are in general the same. For our purposes, a thumbnail summary of the chaos theoretical features of pattern that apply to dynamical systems such as the foregoing would be as follows. 1. The dynamical unfoldment of the patterns immanent in complex systems lies behind the grasp of everyday experience. Phenomena such as those mentioned above that may appear chaotic or totally unorganized and unconnected in everyday experience, actually contain indwelling, interconnected, deterministic order. Two, the order lying behind the appearance is that of self-similarity. Not self-same, but self-similarity. And self-referentiality across scale and aspects of nature. This means that a general similarity of patterns repeats itself ad infinitum, and more detail is revealed across finer and finer scales of measurement, often called the Norwegian coastline. And B, the similarity of pattern arises from its pre-existing pattern. That is the self-referentiality. Form arising dynamically from pre-existing form, creating a seamless web of organization and interconnectedness. 3. Self-similar. Self-referential jumps or rapid bifurcations occur in the system in a periodic fashion. Emergent or non-linear, which is also in parenthesis non-additive, cannot add them, branchings occur periodically in the unfolding of chaotic systems. 4. As the behavior of the system unfolds, small, seemingly inconsequential, and often dismissed initial conditions of the unfoldment may diverge non-linearly in rapid fashion toward unpredictable conditions. This feature is referred to as sensitivity to initial conditions, or metaphorically, the metaphorically for high sensitivity to initial conditions that can diverge rapidly the progression of events. It is called the butterfly effect. That from the wordings of Benoit Mandelbrot. When a butterfly flaps its wings in the Amazonian basin, will there be a tornado in Texas? The butterfly effect metaphor is meant to convey in a simple way that a miscalculations of conditions in a weather regime as small as that associated with the flapping of butterfly or bird wings might surprisingly evolve non-linearly toward unpredictable major weather conditions. As with all metaphors, the butterfly metaphor should be taken with a grain of salt. In this paper, attention will be focused upon the self-similarity and self-referentiality features of chaos. And for convenience, I will add in parentheses, self-similarity and self-referentiality we have mentioned in previous lectures as iteration and scale independent. So you will have good use of previous lectures. Chaos theory and the discovery of the world picture. It is becoming increasingly apparent that chaos theory is not simply another theory that will take its place among theories. The dynamical organizational patterns of chaos theory provide an overarching theoretical framework that both patterns and chaos theory provide an overarching theoretical framework that both enables and encourages us to cross traditional disciplinary boundaries in order to discover the natural interconnectedness among all phenomena. All. So it's scale independent in space, time, but also in knowing. To find the common ground among all theories. Accordingly, in this paper, the powerful, perhaps universal, dynamical patterns of chaos theory are used to undergird the modeling of a unified world picture of evolution of the brain, consciousness, and mind in a transdisciplinary manner. That is, focusing on knowledge or natural processes or mechanisms which are common across many disciplines or scalar levels of organization. Could I have some coffee, please? Just a sip. Inte skaka.
Inte skaka.
And I made farmer's coffee. So it's grind inside.
Too sophisticated for me.
Cheers.
Farmers coffee är super not to shake it.
Yes, farmers never shake, they just break. This chaos theoretical effort involves the merging of ideas and research across psychology, philosophy, neuroscience, thermodynamics, mathematics, evolutionary theory, and general systems theory. Psychology, I often think, is potentially the most diverse and generalizable discipline. It is one that potentially can handle the largest possible part of the totality of the facts of experience. The final test of all theoretical work. Quote from Holton, 79. After all science that defines itself as the scientific study of human behavior, cognition, and experience would have to be exactly that pervasive in scope. It is difficult to imagine on what grounds certain categories of human experience would be excluded. As psychologists, therefore, it seems to me that we have the scientific responsibility to attempt to understand and describe virtually everything that involves human experience. Not only must we psychologists concern ourselves with the traditional topics and dynamics of research and practice, but must extend our understanding to the categories of experience of the people of all the other disciplines. It seems to me that a complete psychology would ask also, for example, why is it that human beings do physics, mathematics, and art at all? How are consciousness, mind, and thought related to these activities? And how does it all fit together? From this point of view, it would seem to follow that if there is to be a theory of everything, that physicists are so fond of claiming as their territory, psychology will likely have to provide it. In order to begin to answer such questions about the fundamental nature of consciousness, mind and thinking, we are not forced to become physicists, for example, but to soften the traditional boundaries of psychology so that its efforts are extended fully to those realms of experience, since all of the disciplinary realms of experience are vapor trails of human mental activity. It seems we will have to combine them all in one single model in order to understand that the processes of human consciousness fully works. In my view, chaos theory and general systems theory will more and more become natural partners in leading psychology toward this broadening transdisciplinary conception of itself. My proposed model for this I called neuroepistemology or neurological positivism, and it subsumes the three traditional positivisms that describe what is basic or pre-inferential to scientific knowledge, by describing that which is pre-inferential to them, namely the common neurological heritage in the algorithmic organization of the brain and the evolutionary mechanism of its exteriorization in as the mental models of cultures. So pre-inferential, just a note here, this is before it starts. Something happens before. And Vandervert, he wants to approach this. Neurological positivism proposes that the pre-inferential, undebatable basic data and order for all that can be known by any creature are in the algorithms of its neurological order. Its neurological computational characteristics, organization, and functional interaction with the environment. And further, that the data for all other positivism, social experiential, exist as high-level homological. That means that they have a common descent, transformations of the neurological order. So he brings everything to a supposed, I would say, implicit neurological order. Within the framework of NP, the algorithmic organization of the human brain has been described as the outcome of maximum power evolution selection dynamics, operating in a space and time that gradually became encapsulated, literally placed in a protective container in the skull and the rest of the nervous system. In addition to the encapsulation of the algorithmic organization of space and time, the self-referential, self-organizing, that is also autocataclysmic, dynamics of maximum power evolution are likewise thought to have been encapsulated as the driving features and forces behind the processes of perception, cognition, and behavior, subsequently mind in space-time. So he has the same view here as we read yesterday from Julian Jaynes, that mind is space and time by his structures. It is a common knowledge that the brain is organized through evolution in such a way that all of its subsystems are interconnected. All of its own internal energy flows, and the energy flows it guides in the rest of the nervous system are thereby interconnected and interdependent. From this perspective, it seems that any consistent modeling of consciousness, mind, and the mind-body relationship could proceed only in a likewise fully interconnected and interdefined fashion. Accordingly, the present paper has three interconnected purposes. A, to describe the evolution of an energy flow guidance framework for space-time consciousness. B, to describe the subsequent energetic exteriorization of the mental models of culture. From the pre-adapted algorithmic organization of the brain, described in A and C, to describe a holographic energy framework relationship between our experiences of body on the one hand and mind on the other, as a generalized differentiation of A and B above. The evolutionary instantiation of the space-time activity, framework of consciousness. Consciousness, like everything else in nature, can be understood as an outcome of dynamic energy particles or principles of thermodynamics. Viewed from its energy framework, the evolutionary struggle for existence is always the struggle for energy capture within the two fundamental conditions of organic existence: space and time. In the NP, the evolution of brain algorithms or brain energy patterns of space and time and those of consciousness are inseparable. A definition of consciousness as the activity of the space-time algorithms of the brain will be provided shortly. The common basic design of brains and nervous systems across phyla illustrates that the evolution of algorithms that deal with space and time contingencies, for example, those of the brain's hippocampus, which is the evolutionary floor of the cerebral cortex, extends back in time over hundreds of millions of years. Thus, consciousness as a category of nervous activity is very, very old. And the human brain can be viewed as carrying in it a triune paleontology of consciousness that involves that of reptiles, pre-hominid mammals, and humans. From where did consciousness arose? From what general dynamical conditions was it constructed and encapsulated in the brains of creatures? Lotka-Volterra provided a rather straightforward universal way of understanding the manner in which brain algorithmic patterns of energy flow might be selected and retained from space and time activity on the parts of the dynamics of systems of energy transformers. We can adapt the scenario provided by Lotka to help understand the evolutionary and dynamical instantiation and encapsulation of the algorithms of consciousness as the pure or general form of this space-time activity. It might be helpful in the following example to imagine, for example, the pursuer as a fox and the pursued as a rabbit. This is an admittedly primitive illustration of the model of approach to the problem in terms of maximum power principle. In the case of a pursuing transformer, a creature of velocity v seeking encounter with a pursued transformer of velocity. And this looks like this. It's a way of modeling out these rather difficult factors. So this is the rabbit, and this is the predator, the fox. They are constructing a system that is permanent and consistent. And time is the pursuing, that's the verbal factor, and space is the static or dynamic factor. Yeah, this is tough things, but actually I never heard it this clear before. Oh, tough things. Let me ponder this while. Here we have a quote from Packard and Shaw, and they have earlier suggested that the chaotic fractal nervous system that has been selected has met the demands of the chaotic fractal possibilities of an ever-changing environment. Quote here from their communal book. Chaos is often seen in terms of the limitations it implies, such as lack of predictability. Nature may, however, employ chaos constructively. Through amplification of small fluctuations, it can provide natural systems with access to novelty. A prey escaping a predator's attack could use chaotic flight controls as an element of surprise to evade capture. Biological evolution demands genetic variability. Chaos provides a means of structuring random changes, thereby providing the possibility. Could I have some more farmer's coffee, please, Kalle? Sorry to bother you. Should take some as well. It's supposed to be healthy.
Yes.
It's very tasty, but it's different taste than ordinary coffee. In the NP, the maximum power evolution of a space-time neuromatrix in creatures constitutes the basis of the self-referential and autocatalytic consciousness. It is to such a description and definition of consciousness we now turn. The definition of consciousness. The hardwired space-time cognitive mapping functions of the brain's hippocampus have been described in some detail by O'Keefe. However, there is a deeper question. Is there evidence for a hardwired space-time neuromatrix in the brain that could translate into the experience of consciousness? Melzack has developed a pervasive model to account for the diversity of phantom limb experiences that involves circuitry through the brain. And that, I think, jibes well with our everyday experience of an active stream of consciousness. And now it gets even more thrilling. To explain vivid phantom limb experiences among people born without the particular limbs in question, which is true. People who are born without the limbs have still access to them. Melzack has proposed a hardwired neuromatrix dispersed over three major brain circuits that continuously generates a pattern of impulses that indicates that the body is intact and univocally one's own. I interpret these hardwired patterns of impulses closely in line with Melzak's interpretation. To represent a continuously generated feed-forward template of the active body universe. That this continuously generated pattern of impulses represents a pure space-time template for the body is evidenced by the fact that the missing body part, even if congenital, is experienced as extended in space and time. And this is beyond belief, but it's very, very common with people who are born without limbs, that they still have them. And that has never had any good explanation. I remember reading couples Blakesley, Alice and Andrew, I think, Barbara and Andrew. Blakesley, who wrote about bad body map. I think that was part of lectures in the 150, 160. They took it up, and their explanation is that we all project from a single attractor a holonomic or holographic body. So the body is a hologram. And usually when you see this, you think, oh, is it only a hologram? Well, being a hologram is much more than being material. It is much more informationally condensed. So it's not to say, is it just a hologram? It is just the opposite. Thus, the phantom limb experience, somewhat surprisingly perhaps, is a vital clue as to the origin and nature of consciousness we all experience. While Melzak did not connect his model with consciousness, I propose that conscious experience is the continuously generated entirety of the activity of the pure space-time template of the body in the brain. Body in the brain is the brain map, pretty close anyway. It feeds forward the integrity and whereabouts, where it goes, where it is, what it is, of the genetically derived template of the body universe. It is in my view that consciousness continuously constructs this model of space-time in the brain as a comparator system by which the brain can moment by moment differentiate itself from and make sense of the constant barrage of incoming sensory information as itself continuously reconfigures its own dimensionalities. And this is so good, I have to go through it a little bit more careful. In my view, that consciousness continuously constructs this model of space-time in the brain as a comparator system, to compare, difference you can call it. It's iteration once more. It's the idea of consciousness as an iterative process, not an imitating process. And between these two scenes, there is a cataclysm. They are very different. But without thinking we will always be in the repetitive idea. We think naturally, and I would say that it's very human. We also have historical reasons for believing that, but repetition and sameness, this is what we think consciousness is. I would say 99% of cognitive researchers and cognitive philosophers and scientists, at least until 2012, somewhere there. Churchland to be mentioned, and Chalmers. Couples Churchland, who have very hard time to get the idea of consciousness into their mental scheme for good reasons. One of the three major brain circuitries proposed by Meltzer provides the brain with a sense of self. Without the comparator function of consciousness, as described here, the evolution of a self-contained, self-referential organism would not seem to be possible. Without the continuously fed forward parameters of the space-time, of the organism moving through the larger space-time of its surroundings, as depicted in the Lotka scenario, the hunter and the hunted. The organism, figure environment, ground differentiation would break down, and the chaos of total disorder that precedes the cosmos order would reign. It appears that consciousness is as fundamental to our being as it possibly could be, and as it, in fact, seems to us to be. Lotka's space-time activity scenario, coupled with Meltzak's continuously generating neural matrix, has provided the basis for a preliminary chaos theoretical definition of consciousness. However, the more complete story of space-time, and therefore consciousness, lies with Pribram 91 holonomic brain theory. I will just take the short paragraph or shortest paragraph of Pribram, and then I will make a break. Pribram's holonomic composition of space and time in the brain. In NP, it is proposed that chaotic holographic space and time have been encapsulated in the brain through countless millennia of iterations of maximum power principle energy flow refinements via the struggle for survival, rabbit-fox, among creatures as depicted in the Lotka scenario. In this section, the specific question that will be papered is as follows. What neurological structures and related dynamics have evolved to represent holographic space and time in the brain's neural matrix that gives rise to consciousness and the holographic apparitions of phantoms. Within Pribram's holonomic brain theory, as differentiated from his early purely holographic brain theory, holoscapes are described as organizations of dendritic microprocessing, wherein space and time and spectra are embedded. Holoscapes are the fundamental units of dendritic microprocessing and are comprised of ensembles of frequency, amplitude, and what we call phase activity. The coordinated information necessary to project a hologram. Networks of holoscapes are therefore transformable in the brain into our everyday holographic-like experience of perception, cognition, in a ground of space-time consciousness, and all composed within the skull. Holoscapes are by definition algorithmic in guiding energy information flow compositions toward optimization, both in phylogenesis and ontogenesis. Ontogenesis is the start of life, phylogenesis, the different species. This entropy information aspect of processing in holoscapes connects their evolution with the complementary thermodynamic principles of maximum power evolution, which drive living systems progressively toward higher qualities of energy flow and entropy maximization. We can now describe in terms of maximum power evolution how holonomic networks have come to provide just an essential fit of characteristics and tremendously refinable processing in motor perceptual cognitive systems that, in order to survive, remember the Lotka scenario, must master an environment cluttered with prey and predators and a myriad of other objects and events in a constant flux. Darcy Thomas long ago anticipated the dynamical evolution of whole systems, such as networks of holoscapes that compose the adapted world inside the skull. The form then of any portion of matter, whether it be living or dead, and the changes of form which are apparent in its movement and its growth, may in all cases alike be described as due to the action of force. In short, the form of an object, included its detailed internal structures, is a diagram of forces. In this sense, at least, that from it we can judge or deduce the forces that are acting or have acted upon it. This is similar to a fish fin that reflects the hydrodynamic properties of water. A fish that is in water, its fin will reflect all flows, flux, movement of water. It will be in the fin. So it will equally be in the fin as in the water. The idea that the fish somehow never was in the water is wrong, and this is usually the model in biology. Below is a description of the features of the diagram of forces of holonomic processing. 1. The projection of experience away from its locus of processing. The world composed inside the skull appears to consist of objects and events out there, it is difficult to imagine any workable evolutionary prey-predator scenario without such holographic type exteriorization projection. In NP, this automatic projection of experience away from its actual locus in the brain is referred to as primordial perceptual constancy. Which is thought to provide the ground and the process of consciousness for all other constancies. For example, the color, size, and shape constancies. 2. The unfoldment and storage of multiple hidden nested orders among networks of holoscapes, which may be activated by attentional and intentional processes, and the immediate recognition of any minute portion of a figure as the entire figure, even if we never before consciously perceived it in that particular fraction. And that refers to the very interesting, we can see something in a very small shape, a piece of something. And because our consciousness is fractal, we can immediately understand what it is, even though we never ever seen it. This is how fractal consciousness works. And this defies the Platonic idea of ideal forms, and also the modern sense of forms somehow being out there, a more Aristotelian way of looking at it. The tip of a predator's ear and muffled sound displays in space and time, or an olfactory nuance, is immediately recognizable as the presence of the entire figure. 3. Tremendous, infinite storage capacity. Rapid retrieval and practically instantaneous cross and autocorrelation in computing power for processing 1 and 2 above. In summary of this section, the space-time and spectral holonomic features of the algorithmic organization of the brain provide a better picture of the body neuromatrix or diagram of forces that reflects the overall dynamics of the Lotka scenario. Pre-Brand's holonomic model is absolutely critical. It seems in that it allows us to understand the generation of holographic-like spatial and temporal experiences of phantom limbs. It allows us to extend Melsach's neuromatrix conception to aspects of the sense modalities to understand holographic-like phantom seeing and phantom hearing experiences among those so impaired. In NP, consciousness is the continuously generated entirety of the pure holonomic body in the brain, a continuously active body universe of space-time and spectra, including the constancy mechanism. Consciousness in this holonomic world of awareness composed within the skull. So, put in a short break here. I say thank you very much for your patience. It is very complicated, but now we'll have a summary and maybe some showing of practical details. Okay, put pause please. So I will make a summary here, pretty perfect after 1 hour. And yes, the text was very difficult, no doubt. And the author, Vandervert, also had a tendency to make his sentences pretty elongated, informationally condensed. But lucky enough, the last 2 weeks had made this suggestion of taking up chaotic theory even easier, because there are a lot of parallels going on here, and oddly enough might be synchronicity that is pointing in the same direction. First, little from Julian Jaynes. There is an epic called the Epic of Tikulti-Ninurta, where for the first time in history gods are spoken of as forsaking human beings. The greatest literature of this period, which is possibly the origin of the book of Job, is the Ludlul Bel Nemequi, the first readable lines of which translate as, "My God has forsaken me and disappeared. My goddess has failed me and keeps a distance. The good angel who walked beside me has departed." How similar to some of the Hebrew Psalms, for instance Psalm 42. The reason for this breakdown are several. The success of the bicameral civilizations lead to overpopulation. There are various huge catastrophes, such as the Terra eruption, which is well known, and maybe the origin of Plato's myth of Atlantis. The ensuing tsunami crushed all the bicameral kingdoms around that part of the Mediterranean. Entire nations were destroyed or dislodged, resulting in a large migration of people invading other countries, looking for promised lands, a place to settle down with the gods again, and start another bicameral civilization. One of the reasons that we still have problems in this area of the world, I think, goes right back to this chaotic time. So this is from Julian Jaynes. Richard E. Lind writes in another fashion, but I now see the parallel, how we lose our soul, and how so many, I think in the end found at least 50,000 references, claim that they lost their soul, they are no longer permanent, they do not feel God anymore. They worship God, they do go to the temple, they sacrifice, they do the rituals, but they feel nothing. This is very similar, very similar. Ian McGilchrist, I checked him out, very few people sincerely writes about God after the first millennia, and it seemed to start disappearing much earlier. There is a definite change in everything. And my suggestion here, and this is also indicated by Vandervert, that we take this new direction, and it might be that this new direction wasn't that helpful or healthy even. And the reason is, and this is my conclusive writing here, maybe I should take it with this.
No, you see it clearly.
Oh,
That's
okay.
very, very clearly.
How difference and divergence make for permanence and stability in the system. and I try to illustrate chaotic systems here, and I call it no death. And this is what the peoples all over the world, Mesoamerica, Middle East, especially the Western cultures, the writings of Plato and Aristotle and all other philosophers are extensive. You see between the lines how they are vehemently complaining all the time. They are bitter. And as Plato wrote, goes for all philosophers almost. I lost everything. I don't even exist. He's gone from the world. And the idea of retaking it is this. This is repetition. This is sameness. This is esteem. That is existence, ousia, the ontic movement. All after the loss of the soul and the gods try to go into this direction. And this is very typical. Vandervert explains that evolutionary from the model by, what was his name now, sorry. Lotka. That if you lose your bearings for a moment, you can lose the whole flow. And this is evident from animals when they go into shock system. It could be when they come out of the shock, which is very rare, but what could happen, they will start to look for constancy, so to speak. Their movements will be uncoordinated and they will be afraid. Those animals do not survive for a long time, but it could happen when an animal is sort of enforced with an extended shock, a trauma. And obviously, as we stated before, there was definitely in Greece a trauma going on. What caused it? I am not certain. Maybe we'll never know. But we are living out this trauma. And these animals, like a diseased heart, strive to have stability, strive to have order, sameness, existence, so to speak. The only way to fix the heart is to give it a shock. For our entire system, that would not work. There are so many different ways. And the problem is we are still after going into that zone of non-stability. We're still pretty stable. So it will not be enough to put us into a new mood. The only thing I can think of is EEC. No, it's not called EEC. What is it called? The word I'm looking for is not electrocution, it is ECT. ECT is giving a shock to the system through the brain. And those are given to people who are going to this, actually one of my professors, because he got a depression and he was sent to the hospital and I was giving ECT. They put some sort of mouth guard and they put a very strong current through the brain. So that is similar, but it doesn't work that well. We are too complex. We are, as Vandervert writes, we are not suited for those things. We're way too stable. He went back to all things after a couple of years, I think. The stability in any system, in time and in space and in knowledge, is dependent on how much divergence and difference it can uphold. Systems that strive for likeness, repetition, and monotonous behavior become much less permanent and stable. Something that has been shown by, for instance, the author of Anti-Fragility, Naïb. By exposing oneself to differences, the system can get stronger, more balanced, more coordinated. And in the end, we will make us impermeable to change. We will become eternal. This is why I wrote this no death. For instance, the galaxies, they are eternal. They will never disappear. This is because they are an eternity system. Before Lorentz and Mandelbrot, we did not know, no one did, what makes us durable, permanent and lasting forever. We all went into this direction, which is natural. That's the natural order of going in. But it will not bring stability, permanence or order. We all know those traits built in weakness in the system. And that makes us perishable, impermanent, not being the same person from one day to another. It also builds for lack of stamina, insecurity, needless change, because there are also those things. We are changing our opinions every minute now. We are changing directions. We are fragile and we are fragmented as well. And this is a new tendency. So we are going even more in this direction. In the book, The Seeking of the Soul, Richard E. Lind explains eloquently how the search for sameness and satisfaction in that mean and that manner will only further establish the loss. The only way of losing anything is trying to reclaim it, because that will disrupt the system. Trying to get into what you've lost. This is the original loss. By claiming, when you wish for those things, you are claiming indirectly that perfection and wholeness was not there from the beginning, and that you had to gain it. It's the same thing with the northern and southern school of Chinese Zen. The northern does the possible mistake of implying that we are divided. The southern school elegantly fixes that by making their wish both a non-wish and a wish, and thereby avoiding the problem altogether.
To remind the viewer, it's Rosen who takes up these differences.
Stephen M. Rosen, thank you. This is actually the only way Vandervert points that us. There's no other way of losing. Striving for this, it is what makes the losing happen. This is actually very close to, and to claim perfection and wholeness that was not that from the beginning. Establish the original lack of wholeness. And I would say this is similar as trying to look for the original feeling. Or why not the original manuscript or an original saying of Jesus or some apostle?
Yeah, speaking of that, thousands of people in the United States have become atheists because they claim that there's so many differences in the manuscripts, therefore God cannot allow that, so it's paradox.
Yeah, I remember this and recognize when I read Vandervert's article late last night. I fell asleep with it. But from all my academic studies, people were obsessed with this original. It was like it was outside of their own sphere. And I often got the feeling they had a very distorted view of what space and time is. Because closeness is very important. And their idea, I felt absurd already then, that the original could be so far away in time and space. That is in itself defied by this. Because we don't have access to that degree. The further we go, it becomes more real, closer to here, less real, less of something that is part of the hologram. It is a development, and there is no 1 and 0. There is no absolutes here, never. According to this, there can never be an absolute original. And the looking for it, I felt these people were obsessed, and they were influenced. I will take questions in a second. They were influenced by this striving for consistency, looking for death, looking for impermanence, wanting it, and installing that into their system, and thereby getting more and more frustrated. I remember one professor said that there is no knowledge. We can't learn anything. So frustration was always present, always there. And this, I realize now, is so close to what Richard E. Lind is talking about, and Julian Jaynes. It's excellent with that quote from the Babylonians. My God, why have you forsaken me? We got lost because of the trauma, whatever it was. The further, I would take that in two points. The further we go from the subject in the Klein bottle, the less we can have access to it. We lose it more and more. Space is not a homogeneous Newtonian concept. Space is not the XYZ of Descartes. Space is not the idea already so nicely put. I really like, that's my favorite by Plato, that space is a receptacle that keeps the object. And the same goes for time. The closeness, only the closeness decides how much access we have and how real and original something is. Because these people all lost the original. Even if they found a gazillion signs, this is the origin, and there were other people proving it, it would still be extremely dependent on others. It will not be of reality, it would be a human device. And this I felt so often, that really put their own security into something that could move in any direction, at any time. They felt uncertain. They were like the seekers explained by Richard E. Lind, looking for sameness, like this poor patient of her, his Jane, I think she was called. She's been trying to get herself whole, and that trying out, asking other people to convince her that there are no voices in her head, telling other people to say to her that she is all right and all those things. That was the cause. It was only when she could relax this wish for wholeness, this regain, and I think this is so clearly shown in Vandervert's article, that you can understand how the animal gets traumatized, loses its ability to understand the world for a short while, and then he gets stuck there. And he tries to rebuild the world after the fact, which is impossible, absolutely impossible. But the more he strives to do it, sort of make an ontology of his wild nature world, to know where the fox is coming from, the less that little bunny will know about the fox. the less he will be able to predict where the fox will turn up, and he will be eaten by the fox. The seeking took different names, but they were all the same within academia. It could be looking for the one meaning of a word, one sentence, one paragraph, one true original meaning of a sentence, or a poem also. It could also be the true aesthetics. I had a friend called, let's call him Lasse, that wasn't his true name. He was studying movie. And he took classes where he tried to understand what is true aesthetics in the movies, what is true beauty. And he took that from the outside. And he wanted to find the essence of aesthetics. What is not fleeting aesthetics, what is not what you would call a superficial movie, and have a true, permanent movie. And this installed in him an original lack. He could no longer look at low-budget movies or bad movies. He had to get the supplement all the time. And he tried to add the original lack that he himself created, looking harder and harder. And even to the extent, and this has actually happened, I think there were 4 or 5 people watching in my old bar a fantastic movie. We never heard about it. It was beautiful and we deeply enjoyed it. And so was he. And then he said, "Where is the movie dictionary? I enjoyed it, but now I want to see if it's truly good." This happened. And after we start laughing, he pretended to laugh. This is what they're doing in academia when they create rationality per se. It is what other people think. It is what is written in the books. It is this looking for a permanent truth, a rationality that is pre-constructed. This is why we could have such absurdities as Professor just looking at the paper and be able to discern whether it's good or not from external roots. That made for happenstance and randomness. I would say rationality as it is here, it is the anti-rationality. The search for true method of reference, the original giver of permanent realness, if you like, the seeking of original foundational book of truth or word of truth. It is the looking for the now. Socrates shows this clearly. In his search for this, he first casted out the theater people, and then went the musicians, and then went the artists. He wanted to clear truth, make it consistent, coherent, and sane. And then last went the sophist out. He was attacking them vehemently, and so did his pupil Plato. We try to defend our turf. The less we have, the more aggressive we became in our attacks to protect what we installed as a loss. It's not out there. It is what we make it a loss. And we uphold it every second. But we are out of sync. That is rather the problem. We are not an animal being in the situation which is never fixed. That is what Heraclitus said, the world in flux and in stillness. Yes,
Normally you keep quantum physics in one compartment and chaos theory in one compartment. But perhaps there is a way to reconcile them. For instance, with Schrödinger's cat, you can think about a difference. In this case, would be death and life, death and life, and the thing that makes the cat company would be a butterfly. That is the poison that could collapse.
Oh yeah.
The observer in this case would be perhaps the cat itself. I don't know, but I think
there is a connection here, because chaos theory is when we are active in our reality, so to speak. No one ever claimed that the reality is fixed and static. Why would reality have these mysterious traits? And why has it ever never been hypothesized, put on into front, why had no one of the philosophers of antiquity said the world is completely stable and static? No, it's caused by the trauma. And it becomes for them their reality. Just like Jane, the poor patient, looking for staticness and stillness to get her peace of mind. She went into the wrong direction. And I think when we get here, we have also consciousness and we have a soul. We become observers. Here we are not observers. Remember Aldous Huxley the other day when I started laughing? He said that consciousness is purely passive and doesn't do anything. It's a bit like adding 1 drop of water to a cup of tea. Can only happen here. Can only happen when you really try to extinguish your own consciousness. Take away your soul. Take away spirituality and God, which has been so clearly shown by Julian Jaynes. I think that was the last straw for me to understand. Something did happen and we went into this way, and thereafter we all strived in this direction to the staticness, and we installed the world is not perfect. So even if we hear somebody say the world is perfect, we won't believe. No one will believe that. And this is why we need chaos theory and quantum physics. Because what they essentially do is to show that the world is undivided, but also explain why the world can be distinct, why it can be general, and how it works. This is, for most people today, also an explanation how things comes into existence. By a causal line, by an original factor. Original factor is one of the most locking things in ordinary human beings. The idea that at a certain start, it doesn't have to be the Big Bang, but at some start, everything was defined. And how does that cope with quantum physics and chaos theory? Well, not so well. The butterfly effect is the same as the observer's rule. Butterfly effect makes it impossible to have that idea. It cures us. It makes us heal. And Arkady Plotnotsky said that these are like medicines for us. It takes away a little bit of this lockdown. This is a state of scaredness, not moving. Here is opening up in all directions. Being more balanced, being more in the now and present. Okay, I say thank you very much and have a very pleasant afternoon as it is now.
thank you.